UF has a lot of talent on campus this weekend, and we're going to talk to Swamp 24/7's Blake Alderman about how the weekend went, and if the Gators have a shot at flipping some of the guys from some rival schools. So let's jump right into it. Overall, tell me your thoughts on this 2024 class.
I think they're off to a hot start. I think whenever you look when you think recruiting in the state of Florida, you think the hotbed. You think of buku 5-star, 4-star players, and rankings. If you're a rankings person, you really follow those really heavily. It's still very early in the evaluation process of putting those things out. Camps are going on now. Junior films being reviewed. So, they're very much a work in progress. But I think in general, if you look at Florida from top to bottom, just the state in general, it's maybe not what you would expect of, years past in the state of Florida. So I think when you look at what they put together just so far with their 4 commits right now, you've got your 5-star quarterback in DJ Lagway. That's your bell cow, that's your crown jewel. And if you're going to pick a crown jewel of your class, it's not a bad place to have your quarterback be that guy. So, I think that was a really big need that they hit off out of the gate there. Getting a 4-star running back in Chauncey Bowens, committed earlier. This is a guy that, starting in January has added offers from the who's. So, the Bamas, the Texas A&Ms, the Georgias, all those types of big schools on there. So, Florida, that was a great early evaluation for them. Adarius Hayes, another guy that I really like there, 4-star top 247 linebacker there. Miles Graham, the legacy top 100 linebacker there. So, you're naming a lot of guys that are in the top 100, top 247. So, Florida's really gotten off to a hot start of not only hitting on the areas of need that you need on a team, but also getting those top tier type guys in the boat early.
So you mentioned DJ Lagway, and he is, as you said, the bell cow of this class. Talk about the impact of having him on campus this past weekend and how, truly he's become one of the best recruiters of this class.
Sure. Whenever you've got your quarterback on campus, that's, kind of the guy that everyone always tends to gravitate to, on the recruiting trail. But I think when you've got someone like Lagway that is as aggressive in recruiting guys, this isn't someone that, maybe sends a tweet here or there, on social media. This is a guy that when he takes these visits on campus, from spending time, viewing Florida's first practice there, this is a guy that is literally, walking around practice with, other targets that are there. He certainly walks the walk whenever, he's in person with these guys. This isn't just someone that, kind of, I don't know. I think of it kind of like in dating, if you have a girl that, you kind of text with, but then you meet up in person with, and you kind of just sit there and stare at each other. That's not quite the case as far as how this relates to recruiting. This is a guy that is aggressive on social media. He's aggressive in person as far as trying to, stay in touch with these guys. Every chance he gets to visit, whether it's practice, whether it's a junior day type thing, this is a guy that's coming from the state of Texas and continues to visit at a high rate. And he always makes sure to do it whenever it's a big recruiting weekend for Florida. So that's definitely what you want out of your quarterback commit.
So Jordan Pride, he's a 4-star safety from the Panhandle. He was at UF this weekend, and then he actually went over to Under Armour on Sunday. He's committed to FSU, and his commitment seems a little bit shaky, let's say. Do you think that this is a situation similar to Rod Kearney last year and that ultimately UF could come out on top?
I think it's comparable. I think that, having Woodson there at Florida State leave and go to Arkansas, that was really the coach that he's kind of circled as the one he's connected with the most. Right. So I think that loss has him shopping around. I definitely think that, talking to him, at Florida on Saturday and then talking to him again on Sunday at the Under Armour camp, he's not shy in saying that, that commitment is there. He considers himself a Florida State commit. But he's certainly keeping the door open to other schools, and I think that, I think Florida's in a really good spot for him, so I think it's somewhat comparable in the sense of, you've got a guy that's committed to Florida State that Florida has a good shot to flip. We'll see how things go forward. He's talking about visiting, schools like Texas A&M, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee. So he's certainly, keeping his options open as far as, listening to what other schools have to say. But, he was up front today when asking him, at the Under Armour camp, is Florida probably the school that you feel is the biggest threat to FSU at this point? He said that was the case.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on the wide receiver and tight end openings? Is not having a wide receivers coach hurting UF with any of these elite wide receiver targets?
I think it is, from spending time at Under Armour, Florida's wide receiver board in general, it's still a work in progress, I guess is the best way to say it, because a lot of the offers are still fairly new. As soon as things turn to, 2023, as far as the year of 2023, a lot of the offers went out there. So the offers are still fresh, but talking to guys like 5-star Jeremiah Smith, who you're going to have to flip from Ohio State anyways, which is going to be a tall task. But he was still openly talking about, I'll visit Florida in the spring, talking official visit as a possibility down the road. But from talking to him at Under Armour on Sunday, he's really sort of hit pause with Florida at this point. He's waiting to see where the hire is. Is it a guy that he connects with? 4-star Chance Robinson is another guy down in St. Thomas Aquinas down there in South Florida that was really shocked by Colbert's departure. He's also kind of waiting to see where things go from there. He's probably not so much of, at a standstill with Florida as a guy like Jeremiah Smith is. He's still talking with people at Florida. He's still talking about a visit there. So he's maybe not so much waiting for who the hire will be to kind of take the next step of visiting Florida. But, Florida even general, this past Saturday, they had a guy, 4-star Mario Craver, who was on campus, who's been offered at wide receiver. BJ Gibson, another 4-star guy who took his first ever visit to Florida. They don't really seem affected by the coaching loss or the loss of Colbert there. I think it's more of just not knowing the future of, who's the guy going to be. Do I connect with him? Does he relate to me? Do we mesh, I guess, is kind of more of the big questions these guys have. So I don't know that it's really, I would say that I guess you can say it is hurting Florida because, again, not having a position coach is something that's affecting, them. But the way Florida staff is also made up is they have the Army. It's been well documented, all the coaches that they have there from top to bottom. So, David Doker is the assistant wide receivers coach at Florida. He's really taken the reins. That was who was coaching the wide receivers on Saturday at their open practice. He's the one who's offering guys still at the wide receiver position. He's communicating with these guys that have already been offered. So it's not like, everyone's just kind of sitting around that's a wide receiver like, man, where's Florida at? They're still actively recruiting these guys. But again, I think it's just more of just wondering who that person will be when that hire is made.
Do you think that there's a possibility that it is Doker?
I don't know. I don't dabble so much with team news. I would be a little bit surprised just from talking with coworkers that are, more on the team side there. I would say that he's a candidate for the job. I just don't know that there's a lot of confidence that he will be the hire that they make. And again, I guess, if he's already there, you've already started spring practice. So if you were going to make that hire, I think that was something that they would have made before spring ball actually started.
Okay, so we mentioned Rod Kearney specifically earlier. Jonathan Daniels was on campus this weekend. He's a 4-star offensive tackle that Steve Wilfong has crystal balled to Florida State just last week. So is there any thoughts on his recruitment and his visit?
As far as Florida, I think it was a good start, maybe at square 1 or 2 with him. He had already visited before that Saturday visit, last year for the spring football game. So it's not like Florida is brand new to him. But I think as far as, really ramping up conversations with him and building those bonds, I think it's still very early there. It was, again, good first step of getting him around Coach Napier, the other coaches around Florida. I think he's someone that's going to continue to, have to visit more for Florida. And he's talked about, possibly visiting again on April 1st to come back and get some more time. He wants to see more of practice. And, again, he visited for the first practice, but there was so many unseen things as far as, campus tours, academic stuff, seeing facilities, meeting people, that there was so much going on his, his schedule that he had there to where he really didn't get the chance to, sit there and observe them. Coming back and seeing them in full pads, how interesting can be watching offensive linemen when they're just going out there and, in helmets. So I think we'll see. I do think that Florida State is a team to beat right now for him. And, they've been recruiting him the longest, but this is a guy that, again, is blowing up with offers. He's got a lot of schools that he wants to see. He's going to see LSU later this month. He'll be at Florida State on the 11th. So there's definitely some company there with Florida State there. We'll see how things, bigger schools come in there, from the Alabamas and the Auburns and, all those types of schools out there in the SEC that are aggressively recruiting. And, the proof is in the pudding with what they've recruited in the past. So we'll see how things shake out there. He's certainly open to, communicating with these schools, and he's enjoying the recruiting process. But I think as far as Florida, that's a guy that you're going to have to continue to, build the relationships with and get him back on campus.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So 4-star safety Galen Hayward, who is a UGA commit, he was on campus this weekend. And did you hear how it went? Do you think UF has an actual shot here?
I didn't get a chance to catch up with him after the visit. I really haven't, kind of tapped in there just from leaving from Florida on Saturday and then running out to Under
Sure.
Armour in Orlando on Sunday. So I haven't really got a chance to dig in things there. I think there's, still some communication with Florida. I don't think the door is completely closed. But in general, he's talking about taking some other visits. I know Auburn is a team that's on his radar to visit this later this month. So I do think in general that, Florida, they were hot and heavy with him earlier on, offered him, I think, this time last year during a visit there on campus when he stopped by in there. I think that, from when Patrick Toney was at Florida, I don't know that, from checking the evaluations. I mean, Florida had him camp twice back in the summer of last year. I think that they wanted to see some more from him. I think they wanted him, maybe camp some more, go out and see some senior film, spring practice as a senior. So I think Florida sort of was slow playing him maybe last year or even before he made that commitment. So, things have changed. Tony's not there anymore. Austin Armstrong's coming in as a new defensive coordinator. Corey Raymond is taking over as a secondaries coach as a whole. So maybe different people see different things and they like different things. So we'll see. I think that Florida's still in this thing. I would assume that, showing up on campus is a great sign. Getting to see them hit the practice. I mean, his former teammate Bryce Lovett is already on campus at Florida as an early enrollee. So there's a lot of ties there to Florida. I think if you can continue to keep him visiting, is this a guy that's maybe just a flash in the pan of taking these spring visits, just fresh off that commitment, did it on the earlier side of his recruitment because he's still a junior technically right now? Is he just kind of just seeing things after he made his commitment? We'll see. But I think if he continues to take that visits, that could be an interesting recruitment if he does continue to keep the door open as time goes on.
That would be a big win from Napier to steal him away from Kirby. Is there anything else that stood out from you for this weekend that you think that Gator fans might find interesting? Or do you think there's anybody that's maybe close to pulling the trigger?
I don't know so much about pulling the trigger. And I say that because, kids in the spring, if you follow them on Twitter, if you, just kind of keep up with recruiting in general, these kids are setting visits at a high rate over March and April, and I think in general, a lot of these kids want to take these visits. They want to, see what's out there. New offers have rolled in since the start of the new year. So, I think kids in general are going to, just see what else is out there. I think for just some interesting things from this past weekend, just having, two of their commits on campus. They had a Darius Hayes on campus. They had DJ Lagway on campus. So those guys are still actively recruiting for Florida. A safety down in South Georgia that I think is an interesting player is Josiah Davis. He was offered back in February. Florida is the leader for him. That's someone that I think that, you should keep an eye on going forward. They really like what he does there. He's listed as a safety. He's probably one of those guys that's more of like a hybrid between a safety and a linebacker, can do a little bit of those things there. But he's a player that the staff really likes. So Florida's coming out of there as the leader. Having 5-star offensive tackle in the 2025 class, Mason Short, very early in his recruiting process with him being a 2025 player. But, that's a guy that they got on campus again. He seems to connect well with Rob Sale and Darnell Stapleton. And one of the interesting things, I haven't written the story yet. I spoke with him tonight after Under Armour. But from talking with him, I was like, what was maybe one of the big moments out of the visit? And he said that he actually was sitting in Billy Napier's office having his conversation with him. And the two of them were able to watch Anthony Richardson run his 40-yard dash and do all of his testing things. So he said it was kind of like watching like a dad watch his son walk for the first time. So he said that was, an interesting moment to see, a guy like that, Napier see, one of his past players in there. So, we'll see. It's going to be a busy spring. They're going to have kids on campus every weekend during the week when spring break pops up. So it's going to be a busy time. This is just the first wave of like a billion visits that are going to happen over the next couple months.
And obviously there'll be a lot that come to the spring game, which let's talk about the spring game. UF is having it on a Thursday again. I understand why they do that. But thoughts on if it was an overall success last season, or do you think maybe it didn't really matter? Do you think that, Florida pulled a kid that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise had that game been on Saturday? And do you have any thoughts on it being on Thursday again this year?
Last year when I saw it was set on a Thursday, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this is dumb. That's on
Yeah,
a Thursday. Like, why would they do this? But the turnout was much better than I
it was.
expected from a
It,
recruiting
it was.
standpoint.
Yeah.
They had a lot of big time guys. I don't know that there was somebody that they wouldn't have landed had it been on a Saturday compared to a Thursday.
Right.
But I understand the fact of, wanting it to be to where it's, they work it around that Easter break. And
Mhm.
when kids start to, students, I guess I should say, start to
Yep.
leave campus. So they wanted to have it to where students are able to see it there.
Mhm.
You're not competing, as far as trying to have these guys decide between, do I visit, Florida or, the 13 other schools that have their spring games that Saturday.
Right.
So I think that was, something that allowed them to get so many kids on campus the way they did.
Mhm.
So, I was pleasantly surprised with how many guys they had on campus there. Whenever I heard it was on a Thursday, I'm like, man, there's going to be like 3 kids in the stand. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way that's going to work. If I told my mom when I was in high school that, hey, mom, I know you worked all day. It's a Thursday. Like, let's go up to Gainesville. Like, my mom probably would have slapped me. So I was surprised how the turnout was there. So, I'm interested to see how that works out. This year, if that they're going to have that same success there. But I think it is worth noting that if you don't have to compete with having these kids choose between all these other different schools that have their spring games the same day, it certainly seemed to work last year, and I don't see why it couldn't work again this year.
I'm interested to see how the turnout is because last year, as you mentioned, it was Easter weekend. It's not Easter weekend this year. And so, in the state of Florida, nobody had school on Friday. This year, there will be school on Friday. So I'll be interested to see. But I was pleasantly surprised with the number of fans that were in the stands as well. I mean, obviously, the spring game happens for recruits, but it's also a great opportunity for fans to get a sneak peek. It's free to get into.
Sure.
Feel the game environment. But I did love it at night. A Thursday aside, it is cool to kick off at night. You've got the lights, got the fireworks. That's a neat little thing for all these players too.
Definitely. I think, a night game in the Swamp, whether it's a spring game or a regular season game, it's definitely a different environment when it's at night compared to the middle of the day.
Absolutely it is. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with us, Blake. I appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can check out your work.
Yeah, Swamp 24/7. Oh, lost my AirPod. Swamp 24/7. It's the Florida Gators 24/7 sports site. We're busy. I've been all over this past weekend recruiting things and losing my AirPods. Under Armour camp on Sunday. I'll have a lot of content from that. Coming out of there. We're at spring practice. Baseball season's going on. Basketball season just wrapped up. The regular season, so it's a busy time there for sure.
All right. Well, lots of good information. I so appreciate. We're gonna have to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me know.
All right. Sounds good. Hey guys, thanks for watching this. We have a ton more content coming for you this week, including a whole spring preview with Blake that's coming out tomorrow morning. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. If you're new to the channel and you want to get caught up, check out this video right here.